Today, I decided to go a different route, and I'm going to show you a different entrance to the museum. So you might have seen it only if you've actually been to the Hermitage and if you've actually been to St. Petersburg. If you haven't, this will be completely new. So let me share my screen with you. And this is a completely different entrance to the Hermitage right here. Um, this, for a long time, was the main entrance to the Hermitage Museum. And you can see the beautiful yellow building right here. So this is the building of the new Hermitage. And if we keep looking to the left, you will see this is where it takes you, right? So this is a little street. If you keep walking further, it will take you to the Palace Square. You will see this is kind of like the main iconic Hermitage building. Here is the second building of the Hermitage that we talk a lot about, that Catherine the Great got constructed for herself when she started collecting art. And so this is the third building of the Hermitage that is called the New Hermitage. And the story of this building is that by the middle of the 19th century, our royal family already had so much art. They had no place to really keep it in these main museum buildings. So they decided to invite an architect who specialized in museum buildings. In fact, our Tsar, Nicholas I, he went to Germany and he saw a museum there in Bavaria that was called Pinakothek, and he met the architect who built it. His name was Leo von Klenze. And the idea of the museum that he saw in Germany was that he really liked the idea that there the art collection blended really well with the interiors. And the idea of the museum was also to educate the people. The way the rooms were designed was supposed to immerse people into the whole mood of the art. Anyway, he invited that architect to create a project for the Hermitage Museum building. And so this gorgeous yellow building, it was completed, and the museum opened in it in 1852. And so this became the Hermitage Museum, right? Our royal family still lived in the whole complex of buildings. They lived in there in this green and white building right there. But the idea was that this would be the place where people are allowed to come in and to actually see their art collection. The admission was free, and you were only allowed to get there by invitation. So the royal family issued invitations for people. This was the only way that they could come in, but it was completely free of charge. It was extremely difficult to get an invitation, as you can imagine. And once the project of the building was issued, they tried to hire different local craftsmen, different local specialists to design some parts of the building. And so what you see here now, these beautiful statues of Atlas, they were designed by a Russian sculptor whose last name was Terebenev, and he basically he submitted his project. He said, I will have these 10 beautiful sculptures of Atlas, and I'm gonna do it at low cost. So the royal family gave him the project. He hired 150 people to work on this. He didn't work on it all alone, and he basically he was looking after the whole thing. He really supervised the project. He almost didn't really create the sculptures himself. He was able to rent apartment for those people who he hired nearby. He was able to make sure that they got paid on time, and so the project was done just like he submitted it. They didn't go over budget or anything like that. And these atlas, really, they have been one of the symbols of St. Petersburg since then. They're one of the really famous sites in the city. It's believed that they make your wishes come true. So if you ever do find yourself in St. Petersburg, you will see lots of people coming to them and touching their toes, because it's believed that the toes have special energy, so you can touch the toes and make a wish. Some people in St. Petersburg believe that different atlas are responsible for different kinds of wishes. So there are some to touch if you want if it's a love wish, some to touch if it's more like a money wish, health wish, and so on. There are certain ideas here with locals about that. And so after the guests of the Hermitage enjoyed this beautiful entrance, they would go into this through the main entrance, and they would find themselves in the main vestibule, which is where we are right now. You will see the Atlas could be seen through those windows. We are on the other side of that door right now. And everything was just designed beautifully in order to enhance people's experience with art. On the first floor, originally was meant to display ancient sculpture, and we have a wonderful collection of ancient sculpture. Right now, this got a little bit rearranged. So this hall doesn't have ancient sculpture right now, but I want to show it to you because it's a wonderful example of how they thought of educating people through museum interiors even. So you can see portraits of characters from ancient history or just world history, like you can see Martin Luther and Aristotle, and every one of those semicircular arches has different characters there. So the idea was that people would come in and they would educate themselves, you know, they would see these famous names and get acquainted with them. And you can also see the beautiful bright walls. I want to say again that originally they would be ancient sculpture in here. And Leo Klenze believed that sculptures are best seen with bright colors on the background, because sculpture is normally white, and when you put these statues into a room with white walls, you can't really fully appreciate all of the craft that the artist put into it. So the sculptures would be placed against these beautiful bright walls. And even the light, he really thought through. You can see that here, the windows, they are located on the sides of the building. And he really believed that the best way to view sculpture is when the sculptures are lit from the side. The reason I'm telling you this is because we'll see a building where the lighting is placed in a different part of the room. This is kind of the obvious thing, right? Windows are normally on the side, but not always. And we'll see a different example. And Leo Klenze also designed even the showcases for the rooms. And different showcases, they had different purposes. For example, some items, you know, they can just be viewed sort of from the front. Their front side is most important. But some items really benefit, you really benefit if you walk around and see them from all of the sides. So for these cases, Leo Klenze designed these, what he called obelisk showcases. This one is an obelisk showcase. And so you can walk around the whole thing and really experience this fully. Anyway, so they really thought through every detail. And the funny thing is, of course, Leo Klenze, he submitted the design. He submitted the design for the museum building, but there were Russian architects who also worked on the project, and I think some of them were a little bit hurt by Klenze's authority and questioned his decisions. Like originally, the walls of the staircase were supposed to be white, but the Russian architect who worked on the project argued that yellow is better, and ultimately, this is what they decided to go for. Anyway, this is the main staircase of that museum. And it brings you to another gorgeous room that was known as a gallery of the history of ancient painting. In Russian, we just call it the Gallery of Ancient Painting, which can be really confusing because you don't see any ancient painting here. Clearly, what's on display is sculpture, right? Well, the idea was, again, that this is where people would get educated about ancient painting. And it was really all about the design of this interior. the walls are designed with different stories from ancient mythology. This is how what they envisioned ancient painting would be like, and so that was the idea. However, eventually this became the hall where sculpture was displayed, and I'll show you one of the most famous exhibits in the Hermitage. If you ask Russians, what is there to see at the Hermitage, a lot of times they would mention this sculpture, even though it's not as famous with guests from abroad. It's called Cupid and Psyche, and it was created in the middle of the 19th century. It's not an ancient sculpture. There was an Italian sculptor whose name was Antonio Canova, and he was really famous all around Europe. And this statue was commissioned by one of Russian private collectors, and it was in a private collection until the revolution of 1917. As you might remember, after the revolution, a lot of these private collections, they got nationalized. That is how the statue ended up here in the museum. The statue is based on a story from ancient mythology of Cupid and Psyche. Psyche was this beautiful woman. She was immortal. And she was so beautiful, though, that eventually people around her started treating her almost like a goddess. And but they almost sacrificed things to her. They almost, paid tribute to her. And Venus noticed that people paid less attention to her. She found out that it was because of Psyche, because people are so overwhelmed with her beauty. And as you might know, Cupid, he's Venus's son, and she asked Cupid to punish Psyche. But when Cupid saw her, he fell in love with her, and he devised a plan that he would bring Psyche to a distant place where he had his home. During the day, Psyche would just enjoy her life, and she would she would be fed, she would be entertained, and she would see Cupid at night. The only condition was that she was not allowed to see him. But one day, curiosity took over, and she she had a little candle that she used to look at her husband's face, and a little bit of wax kind of dripped on him. He woke up all angry because nobody likes to be awakened by a drop of wax on their body, right? Plus, she didn't obey his orders, right? The only condition was that she doesn't look at him. Anyway, she had to go back, and in order to earn her forgiveness, Venus made her do all sorts of different tasks. She even had to go in the underworld, and ultimately, she was about to fall into this endless sleep, and that is when Cupid came. He came to his wife's rescue, and this is the moment that you can see here, that beautiful moment. And so basically this whole half of the museum is dedicated to sculptures by Canova, and the other side is a Danish sculptor whose last name was Thorvaldsen, and he was really influenced by Canova and basically created sculptures at the same time in the same style. And there is a wonderful collection of these here in this hall. Anyway, the new Hermitage building has so many amazing highlights when it comes to sculpture, when it comes to antiques. And I want to show you this room. You've probably already noticed how much thought they put into the decoration of all of these halls. This hall, as you can see, it's called the 20-column hall, obviously because of the beautiful columns that are in the center of the room. And the walls are decorated with, again, what would look like stories from ancient mythology. Really what they are is the kind of pictures that one would find decorating ancient Greek vases, because this room originally was meant for ancient Greek vases. Of course, as you look in the showcases, you will find that ancient Greek vases, the pictures aren't colorful, like the pictures on the walls, but the subjects are very similar. You know, ancient Greeks, when it came to dinners, when it came to feasts, they liked to be godlike. What I'm trying to say by that is, of course, during the day, they could have a regular meal at the table and talk about everyday matters with their family. But when it came to nighttime, when it came to feasts, they liked to dress in white. They liked to lay down in their chairs. They liked to drink wine, and they liked to talk about, you know, much more elevated topics. And sometimes what was depicted on the vases was helping them think of such topics. For example, they could have um, depictions from, you know, certain military stories, because war was important and they could talk about the war. There could be subjects from ancient mythology that they could discuss. And no wonder ancient Greece had so many philosophers, because this was all really cultivated, right? At feasts, people would talk about things like this. Another name of this hall is the Hall of the Grand Vase. And the reason for that is this gorgeous vase right here in the center. It's called Regina Vasorum, which means the Queen of Vases. And the reason why they call it the Queen of Vases is because it is the decor of this vase is so incredibly different from your typical ancient Greek vases that you can see in museums. And another amazing thing is that how well this decor got preserved. This was a hydria. Hydria means a vase for water. Hydrias normally have a wide belly and a narrow top. They have three handles. You can only see two, but there's one on the back side as well. The ancient Greek women would would carry hydrias on their heads when they went to the well to get some water. And then the third handle, which we are not seeing at the moment, but the third handle would be used to pour water. Anyway, this hydria is beautifully decorated with this really deep black color, which is actually clay. They do certain things with clay so that it looks like this. And then there are two tiers of golden decorations. They are volumed little figures that were created separately and then glued onto the surface of the vase. And once that was done, they used paint, gold paint and white paint, in order to add the details. We don't know, and archaeologists to this day don't know exactly who are all of these people that are characters that are depicted in the top tier of the vase, but they think that this is connected with the cult of fertility. So probably one of them is a goddess of fertility. There are some that are just people who are depicted holding different sacrifices to the goddess of fertility. For example, there is a man there holding a little piglet. There are other characters of ancient mythology that are associated with goddesses of fertility. For example, Bacchus was not only the god of wine and fun, but he was also the god of re-emerging natural patterns, like the nature that revives every year in the springtime, dies in the fall, and then revives again, and so on. Anyway, the history of the vase is amazing. It was in the collection of a Roman aristocratic family. Their last name was Campana, and they basically were really associated with the National Bank of Rome. The National Bank of Rome gave people loans, and it was allowed for people to bring if they owned any works of art or any important antiques, they could bring them to the bank in order to get their loan and leave it there. And the Campana family, they just really got into antiques. They got incredibly interested in antiques. And one of them, in the in the 19th century, got so into antiques so obsessed with them that he started embezzling funds from the Bank of Rome in order to get himself a beautiful collection of antiques. Granted, he wanted it to be available to everyone, and he even started a public museum so that everybody who's in Rome, they could go and look at the beautiful collection. But there was an inspection, and they found out that he was embezzling funds. They wanted to send him to jail, but the public, the citizens of Rome, actually signed a petition to defend him because you know they just really appreciated his love of art, his aesthetic taste, and the fact that he made the museum available for everyone. So instead of being sent to prison, he was just exiled from Rome. And the Vatican decided that all of the antiques from the collection, they would be sold in order to make some of the money back that he lost. And luckily for us, the head of the Hermitage Museum, the Hermitage Museum already existed then, this building already existed, was there. And thanks to his connections, he was allowed to go and actually inspect the Campana collection first. He was the first one. And he offered to buy lots of beautiful items from this collection, including this gorgeous vase. This is how we acquired it for our museum, which is an incredible story in and of itself. So, this is just one of the many amazing stories behind the Hermitage items. And every gallery that we can think of, every part of the museum has famous pieces that you already heard a lot about, and has some other amazing, just less famous works. When we talk about Italian art, I normally take you down the Florentine gallery, where we see the Da Vinci pieces, or where we see a beautiful fresco by Fra Angelico. But today I'm going down a parallel gallery that is called the Venetian Gallery. And here we can see some masterpieces of Venetian art. And just as the camera is kind of going around this room, I wonder if you've noticed just how beautifully bright Venetian art pieces are. They are, Venetian artists were true colorists. They really used lots of beautiful bright colors. They paid a lot of attention to how these colors combine together. And one of the most famous colorists in Venetian art was Giorgione. I want to show you this beautiful piece by Giorgione that is called Judith. And Judith is based on a rather grim story, right? So Judith's town was besieged by the army headed by this man, Holofernes. And in order to protect her town, she went into his tent, she spent the night with him, and in the morning she beheaded him. So it's a rather grim story, but you don't see any of this in the painting. It's really peaceful. If you look at Judith's face, you can see how calm it is. And she's just kind of, thinking about the fact that her town is now free. And you can see a little bit of the town in the background. But as I said, Giorgione, just like other Venetian artists, he was just an amazing colorist, right? And a good example of that is just the colors that he uses. The pink of her dress and the blue of the town in the background combine beautifully in her belt that is purple. And another thing that art historians notice is that Giorgione does not use different colors for items that are located close together. For example, it's hard to even discern kind of like what the town in the background is, because he paints it all with blue, just very, very similar shades of blue and not much else. The crazy thing is that up until 1970s, the visitors to the Hermitage would not even be able to appreciate all of the beautiful colors of the painting, because by then the painting was in a really bad shape. It was covered with a really dark layer of lacquer. And if you look closely, you can see in the top left corner, there's a tiny square, tiny brown square there. This is actually a square that was left there by the restorers that worked on that painting, just to kind of like as a reminder of what it used to be like. So what happened to this painting is that originally it was painted on a closet door. It was part of a beautifully decorated closet. And then it was purchased. When it was purchased, of course, it was moved from wood to canvas. That was normal. And then when it was painted on furniture, they used furniture lacquer for it. They stripped down the lacquer from the painting. But then every new museum that it went to, they added a new layer of lacquer on top of it. And eventually, when the Hermitage purchased it, they even, the lacquer that they used wasn't even completely transparent. It was yellowish to give it a certain museum tone, as they said. Anyway, what ended up happening is that, in the 20th century, the painting was so yellow that you could hardly see some of the details of the painting. And it took them a really long time. The restorers, when they decided to clean all the lacquer off of the painting, they did it, centimeter by centimeter. Sometimes they used cotton balls soaked in special solution, sometimes even a scalpel to scratch off the layers of lacquer. And once they kind of like relieved the painting of all of that extra layers of lacquer, they were able to see all these different, details that people weren't able to see before, like some of the flowers in the bottom. People didn't even know they were there. The details of the town in the back, some other plants. None of this was available before the painting was discovered. They even were able to find Giorgione's fingerprints there in the painting. Yeah, which is quite amazing. So this is just one of those hidden treasures of our Italian galleries that are here. Anyway, if we go back to where we originally started, as you remember, this is the Gallery of Ancient Painting. And the original design project was to kind of make people go on a journey from ancient art all the way to the Russian art. Kind of that would be the end of the journey. And oftentimes when I bring people to the Hermitage, a question I get is, can you show us some Russian art? Well, the thing is, there isn't any right now. All the Russian art eventually was moved to the Russian Museum, which is a different museum in St. Petersburg. But when they meant to build the Hermitage Museum, the royal family had a little bit of Russian artwork. And so the idea was that people start here with ancient art, and then they find themselves over there on the other side of the staircase. And those were the rooms that were meant for Russian art. Eventually, this got reorganized, and the rooms that were originally meant for Russian art right now are occupied by our amazing collection of Flemish art. And when we talk about Flemish art, Rubens is the most popular artist, and we certainly talked about him in some of the Hermitage tours. But there are other great Flemish artists. It's not just all about Rubens. And Van Dyck is one of them. He was one of Rubens's students and a real prodigy, a real genius child, because he had his own studio when he was a teenager. He was one of Rubens's students when he was 19. So imagine this guy had his own studio already, but he kept on studying. When he got a chance to become Rubens's student, he used the chance. And eventually, Van Dyck made his way all the way to England, where he was the court artist of the king. And he created some amazing portraits there. But this one is very special because this is the artist's self-portrait. So here he depicted himself. He wasn't the first one who really started showing his model's personality through the paintings. It wasn't his invention, but he certainly elevated it and brought it onto a new level. His portraits were extremely flattering. That's why he was so popular, I think, in England at the time. And he was able to combine the features of a luxurious state portrait where you see the attributes of status, the attributes of wealth, and still, yes, he did highlight the most important personality features of his models. And so here he paints himself as this really well-educated, elegant man, but a perfect artist. You can see that he is leaning on this ancient ruin here. This was just a universal symbol of like a finite nature of life. And so the idea was that, you know, he's quite a philosopher too. He also shows off his skill as an artist because the painting isn't especially bright. There is not a lot of different colors, but he manages to, just using different shades of brown, white, and black, to just show you different textures, show different shades of color, which is quite incredible here. So he was mostly famous for his portraits, but sometimes he had other works commissioned from him. And this one is one of the religious works that was commissioned by an order that was especially devoted to Virgin Mary. And this painting is called "The Rest on the Flight to Egypt," also known as Madonna with Partridges. There are partridges right here. So first of all, and now I can relate, now that I think so much about babies. You know, he manages to depict this scene, you know, rest on the flight to Egypt, but it's like a scene from everyday life. You know, if you've had a toddler, you know that toddlers won't sit still. And it's interesting because sometimes you see those paintings and Jesus is just sitting there, you know, that he doesn't require a lot of attention. But here you can see that Jesus is very restless in Virgin Mary's hands. Her husband is just so tired, and even she just looks kind of tired. And these cherubs next to them are doing their absolute best to try to entertain Jesus, and he is quite you know, occupied with what's going on. So on one hand, it's just this one beautiful, charming subject from everyday life of a family with a toddler. On the other hand, this painting is filled with symbols that point out to the virtues of Virgin Mary. As I said, the religious order that ordered it from Van Dyck, they were really focused on the character of Virgin Mary. So, for example, partridges, apparently, they were a symbol of sin, and they are flying away as Virgin Mary is present. The tree that they are sitting under is an apple tree, and Virgin Mary oftentimes or sometimes would be depicted next to an apple tree, and this is the sign of the fact that she overcame the original sin. So her being depicted next to apples means the opposite of Eve being depicted next to apples. And even sunflowers, they're actually were believed to be a symbol of her divine nature. So this is just a wonderful praise to the character of Virgin Mary. And I'm really excited that we have it in our collection, because if you look around, most of the works by Van Dyck, as I said, they are portraits. But a couple great works on religious subjects really enrich our collection. And really briefly, I also want to mention another amazing Flemish artist whose last name was Snyders. And Snyder's, he was a true master of still life. And that's another genre, that was brought up to a completely new level. Think of a still life. A table that is like nearly empty. Maybe there's a vase there, maybe an apple, a knife, or something like that. Snyder's goes, full in. He created the series called Stalls. And basically, the idea behind the stalls is just to show the abundance of nature. These pieces, they would be hung in a dining room, and they would be just absolutely appetite enticing pieces. And these stalls are thematic, so you can see meat and poultry, for example, a fish stall, a vegetable stall. I think the fruit stall is a masterpiece that really stands out, because it also shows Snyder's as a Baroque artist. Um, First of all, like I said, the abundance of nature was a really common theme for Baroque. But another thing is that there's a lot of movement in a Baroque painting. How can there be movement in a still life? The word still life doesn't even, implies stillness, but Snyder's adds some movement here. For example, you can see a monkey that is climbing onto the table, trying to empty this basket of fruit, and there's a dog there in the corner that is barking at the monkey, which just adds sound, almost sounds, and smells to the painting. Another interesting thing is that if you look at some of this fruit, if you maybe have tried to plant something, or you just, from life experience, you might also notice that some of this fruit cannot exist together at the same time of year. And maybe nowadays in the supermarket you can buy anything, but back in the 17th century, they really couldn't coexist at the same time. In fact, some of these fruit did not even exist in Western Europe at that time. And Snyder's had never seen some of these fruit. He just maybe saw pictures of them, or maybe heard descriptions of them. But nevertheless, he was able to create, again, this like really the painting that tickles your taste buds and just makes you want to try all of these different things, even if he himself had never seen these beautiful, some of these beautiful fruit. Anyway, again, back to our whole of ancient painting, right? We kind of went that way on that side of the staircase. And I talked about how lighting was so important to Klience. And I said, sculptures are best lit up from the side, but paintings, they are best lit up from the top, especially when it comes to large paintings. And these rooms that were called Skylight halls, they certainly are all dedicated to really large paintings. We have seen the Italian skylights, talked a lot about them, but something that I haven't really shown you before, this is the Spanish skylight. And our Spanish skylight has some amazing pieces too. I want to tell you about the Goya. We have only one Goya in the Hermitage, and it's actually a recent addition. It only appeared in the Hermitage in 1970s, and when I read the story, I thought this was just so incredible, because it was gifted to the Hermitage by an American collector, Armand Hammer. Maybe you've heard of him before. And I thought, why would an American art collector gift a Soviet museum in the 70s a painting? It doesn't make sense. And so even at the Hermitage, when they taught us about it, they just said it so matter-of-factly and never told us the backstory. I did the research on my own, and it turns out that Armand Hammer was one of the friends of Soviet Union. And that means that he really worked closely with the Soviet Union in many different ways. His father was one of the founders of the Social Socialist Party in America. In fact, he's called Armand Hammer to in honor of the emblem of that party, which is arm and hammer. Anyway, he was really young when he visited the Soviet Union for the first time, and he met Vladimir Lenin himself, and Lenin gave him a signed photo that he kept for the rest of his life. And Hammer was one of the middlemen between the Soviet Union and the American collectors in 1930s. You know, this is kind of like one of the dark pages of the history of the Hermitage, because the Soviet Union needed money for the industrialization of the country, and basically they said that art museums had to come up with items that would be sold abroad. And so the Hermitage, for example, found almost 3,000 artworks. Not all of them were sold to the West, but a lot of them were. And there were other antiquities like Fabergé eggs, for example. Some of them were sold abroad then. Anyway, Armand Hammer was one of those people who helped make this work, you know, and connected Soviet officials with American collectors that were willing to pay. And he himself has a little museum in LA, and some of the pieces there include Rembrandts, for example, or Gauguin's, and there's another Goya there. So it really makes sense why he would be grateful to the Soviet Union and why he would want to give this piece to our museum. Anyway, so this is one of the amazing pieces in our Spanish collections. We have more, and you know, a lot of the Spanish art is large in size because a lot of it was commissioned by the church. It was supposed to hang in churches, and again, the skylight lighting makes it just so perfect. But this one is an exception. As you can see, it's called Luncheon. We in the Hermitage, we call it breakfast sometimes. And this is a painting by Diego Velazquez. This piece, you would call it a genre scene, like a scene from everyday life. You can see three people at a tavern, they are eating. But Velazquez's contemporaries would be able to really tell so much more about this painting just by looking at it. It was based on these little short stories where young men would try to trick slightly richer older men into paying for their meals in a tavern by pretending that they are their servants. And that explains why their facial expressions are like this. The two guys on the right, they look happy. One is showing you a thumbs up. The other one is toasting with a bottle of wine. And the guy on the left, he looks kind of surprised, like, who are you and what are you doing here? This is sort of like one layer of meaning of this painting. And art critics view it through different lenses. There are numerous ways to interpret it. They say, for example, that maybe this is a symbol of also the finite nature of life, and this has three different ages in a person's life: a young boy, an adult man, and an older man. And then it looks like there is almost like a fourth man in the room, the way that the clothes are hanging. And this could be the spirit of the person after death and things like that. The still life in the front has a religious meaning. Of course, bread and wine are symbols of the communion. Pomegranates were considered the symbols of the church because just like there is many little seeds under the pomegranate skin, that's how the church gets everybody together under its roof. And then art critics argue to this day, what is in the plate? Some people say fish, some people say shellfish. Nobody knows for sure. It's really hard to tell. If it's fish, fish is the symbol of Christianity. If it's shellfish, then the shellfish is the symbol of Virgin Mary, because in a shellfish you can find pearls sometimes, right? And so this is sort of the idea of Virgin Mary. You know, she was a regular person. She was a true pearl. So the still life has a deeper meaning in and of itself too. So yes, it's not one of those large religious paintings that would be on a church wall, but it does have a deep meaning like that. So this is a piece by Diego Velazquez, just another hidden gem. And when we talk about hidden gems, I really have to mention that some of the true hidden gems exist in our museum because of some archaeological excavations that take place on the territory of Russia. We're lucky our country is so big. And I did show this at a tour once, I know. But this is truly a hidden gem. It's worth telling everybody about it. Really few people know about this hall, but the story about this part of the collection is just incredible. It's really worth talking about. So this room is dedicated to the so-called Pazerik burial mound. And Pazerik culture was a culture that existed in Russia around the 4th century BC. And this was a nomadic tribe that lived in the area. The area is called Altai, and that is basically really close to Siberia. The climate in this area is also really interesting. First of all, it's a mountainous region. Second of all, it's normally pretty cold there. So the winter is really long, the summer is really short. And the nomadic tribes that lived on the territory, they buried some of their important people in these burial mounds. And burial mounds are nothing unusual, you know. Oftentimes, archaeological expeditions would reveal things from burial mounds. But the special thing about the Pazerik burial mound is because of the location, during the really long cold winter, water would accumulate inside the burial mound, and then it would freeze in the winter. But during the short summer, it wouldn't fully unfreeze. And so throughout the centuries, there's so much ice that accumulated inside the burial mound that a lot of the things that got preserved in there are the kind of things, they are made of the kind of materials that just are almost impossible to find during archaeological excavation. By the way, this is a burial chamber. This was underground, and this is where all of these pieces were found. Inside the chamber, there was a sarcophagus for a man and a woman. And as I said, there were things that were found inside the sarcophagus. Inside the chamber, not inside the sarcophagus. They were found inside the chamber that are just incredible. Like this one is part of a tent, right? Can you imagine fabric existing, you know, from the 4th century? Well, this is a felt tent. And it's decorated with these tiers of weird patterns, you know, these characters. Right now, you know, anthropologists trying to explain who these characters are, and they think that the one sitting is some sort of a goddess. And so it's a woman, it's some sort of a goddess, and she's holding a tree of life. And the horseman is a mortal, a regular man, maybe even the leader of the tribe, who's probably buried inside the sarcophagus, going over to the goddess to ask for her blessing. So this could be the subject of the tent's pattern. Nobody knows for sure. These are supposed to be solar signs. These are supposed to be some sort of magical animals, like maybe sphinxes or something like that. And that also kind of points out that the sacred nature of this tent. Nobody knows exactly why the tent was there, but the amazing thing was, one of the theories is that the tent would be put up on top of the burial chamber before the people get buried, so that people can mourn them. The bodies would be located inside the tent, and actually that mourning process would last a really long time. They say could be up to a year. How did the body get preserved for up to a year? You'll find out in just a couple minutes. Also, inside the tent, inside the burial chamber, they found these weird things. They call them now the swans, but they aren't really swans, right? Because if you look at their beaks, they look weird. They're not really like swans' beaks. And the wings don't really look like swans' wings. And so they're also made of felt in the 4th century BC. Again, survived because they were in ice. Again, we don't know for sure, what these swans symbolize and why they were put there, but there are theories that swans are the kinds of birds that exist in 3 different worlds. They can swim in water, they can walk on land, and they can fly into the sky. So it's almost like a sacred creature that connects many different worlds together. And then, well, what about all the beaks and stuff? Well, it's believed that it's only part swan. The other part is a vulture. And even though nowadays we think about vultures as like disgusting birds that take apart people's bodies, it can have a different meaning, because if a vulture takes part of your body, it then flies, it takes it into the sky, thus bringing you closer to God. And so a vulture is the kind of bird that helps you transition, from your regular life on Earth into some sort of afterlives. But again, these are just theories that anthropologists have right now. We don't know for sure. And the true highlight of the Pazerik burial mound is this object, which is officially the oldest carpet in the world. This is the oldest carpet in the whole world. And this carpet probably was not created by the Pazerik people. It was probably commissioned. It's believed that it was commissioned from Persia. And again, because of the ice, this amazing piece got preserved so well. I told you I would tell you, how were they able to say goodbye to the body for so long, up to a year? Well, the bodies were mummified, and this is the mummy right here. Apparently, the Pazerik culture were able to mummify. They say we're not as good at it as Egyptians were, but they were still pretty good. And so this is the body of the man that was in the sarcophagus. We know that there was also a woman, but at some point the burial mound was, there was an attempt to loot it. People went in, and the female body, the female mummy, is not preserved as well, so they can't display it. So another amazing thing about this mummy is that eventually, once science progressed further, they studied the mummy with infrared lights, and they were able to identify, you can see this showcase right here, they were able to identify what kind of tattoos he had. So people in the Pazerik culture, they had tattoos. In the middle here, you can see this is like a lion or a tiger. And it would be placed right here, guarding his heart. On the legs, it had depictions of some sort of deer or this type of animals walking up the leg. And one other thing that they were able to discover, that on the thumbs, they had depictions of what looked like roosters. And now they believe, again, we don't know, but they believe that this was just for fun. If they are bored, they could just like play with their thumbs and have a rooster fight and pretend rooster fight. But who knows? Anyway, so this is like a true hidden gem of the Hermitage, and this Pazerik culture is incredible. It was only discovered in 1920s, which was a really turbulent time for our history of our country. The lead archaeologist of that campaign At some point was the victim of Stalin's repressions. He was sent out to build one of the water canals in remote areas, where he got his second education as a hydraulic engineer. And even after his whole sentence was over, he wanted to go back to the excavations and keep them going. But he was not allowed. They say we need hydraulic engineers much more than we need archaeologists. And he was only able to get back to the excavation site in the end of 1940s. So they really keep doing excavations there. It's an ongoing process even nowadays. And this hall is only dedicated to one of the burial mounds, but the territory had several of them. And this is the one that is the most famous one because of the carpet and the other things. One last quick thing that I wanted to show you in regards to the excavations. I've taken you to the diamond room before, and we saw some of the beautiful jewelry that belonged to Russian czars. But we also have another jewelry collection that is called the gold room. And in the gold room, you can see some amazing things that were discovered also during excavations. Again, luckily for us, the territory of Russia is so vast that in the ancient times, all sorts of cultures lived here on this territory. And on the shore of the Black Sea, there were even some Greek colonies. So we have some real Greek gold, ancient Greek gold. And the pieces that I want to show you, can you imagine this? I'm just going to show you the date, right? So around 330 BC, this necklace was created by ancient Greek jewelers. The top part of the necklace is like a fabric that is woven out of super thin gold threads right here. And attached to it are numerous beautiful pendants. Just to think that ancient Greeks did that. And then under the magnifying glass, you can see an earring created in what is now called the opulent style. And the reason we call it opulent style is because of just so many intricate techniques that I used in the design of these earrings. In these circles, they use the technique that is called filigree, which is basically thin golden threads arranged in a beautiful pattern. And then on the side, there is granulation, which means it's decorated with tiny balls of gold. And then again, you can see even more decorations. And again, that same style, beautiful pendants. So in the whole world, there are only 14 earrings that were created in the opulent style. There are 14 earrings like this in the whole world, and 7 of them are at the Hermitage. We're really lucky at the Hermitage. It's because on the shore of the Black Sea, there were Greek colonies, and we were able to find them during excavations. And I love the story. So Greeks did not have magnifying glass. And one thing, we talk about Carl Fabergé a lot when we talk about jewelry. One unknown fact about Carl Fabergé, that besides being a famous jewelry maker, he also worked at the Hermitage as a restorer and a keeper of jewelry. And just for fun, once he tried to recreate these earrings himself, and he wasn't able to do that. And he had all the tools and appliances of the 20th century. So this is quite incredible. And on that note, I want to finish our tour. But again, please feel free to ask me questions in the chat. I'd love to answer. Thank you, Linda, so much for your nice wishes in the chat. I appreciate it. I'll answer your questions, and then, like I promised in the newsletter, I'll tell you a little bit about the Hermitage course that I created. But please feel free to ask me questions. The course is my way of giving you content and stuff while I'm taking a break so that you can keep learning more about the Hermitage, keep learning more about art and stuff. Um, Thank you so much, everybody, for all the wonderful feedback in the chat. I appreciate it. I'll tell you, and you don't have to stay for this part. If you know you don't want this course, you really don't have to listen to it. But if you are interested, if you have some questions about it, not sure whether to use it or not, and I actually have I have sample. I have a question in the chat whether you can watch it again. Yes, you can. I'm recording this, and I will definitely share the recording with you in the next newsletter. During the several wars, how was the art and halls protected? Great question. So the only time that any sort of enemy got any way close to the Hermitage Museum was World War II. Before that, they got close to Moscow, like Napoleon, for example, but they didn't get close to St. Petersburg. But World War II was one of those times when it was pretty scary. The Nazis got really close. They surrounded St. Petersburg. And the museum curators, they knew that this would happen. And so a lot of the art from the Hermitage got evacuated to the Ural region, the Ural Mountains. They had 2 full trains that were loaded with artwork that went all the way to the Urals. As they were loading the 3rd train, Leningrad got besieged by the Nazis, so they weren't able to evacuate everything. But as the city was besieged, the Hermitage workers worked really hard on preserving these items, and some of them were doing scientific work, some of them were doing lectures, and they just kept on doing their work. It was incredible. And soon after the war was over, as soon as the siege was broken, really quickly those trains were brought back. Before World War II was even over, they started bringing the art back into St. Petersburg. And yes, some of the halls got damaged by bombs, and the restorers were working really hard. And I read that, in the Soviet Union, the Victory Day was May 9th, 1945, the Victory Day. And the people who worked at the Hermitage, they didn't even get a day off. They were still working on restoring the rooms. And so they were able to reopen a lot of the museum interiors in November 1945, and the restorers in a matter of months managed to restore 69 interiors, which I thought was just incredible. I'm just so grateful for all your good wishes, and in the chat, I'm so glad you liked the tour. So let me tell you a bit about the Hermitage tour, the Hermitage course. I created the course that gives you a deep dive into everything Hermitage. So today is just the tip of the iceberg, and the other 2 virtual tours we did are a tip of the iceberg. I created a course that has hours of video lectures that I pre-recorded and then that were edited by my team. It's not just me talking, but it has actual pictures there, it's shown in detail. And I'll share this link with you, but it has the list of all the topics that are in the course. So it has the overview of the museum collection. It has the overview of all of the buildings that the museum consists of. We talk about, of course, the highlights of the art, the Renaissance Gallery, the Venetian Gallery. We saw a little bit of Giorgione there, but there's more amazing stuff in the Venetian Gallery. Raphael, Michelangelo, Mannerism. We have a whole topic on Baroque art. This is what is located in those beautiful red skylight rooms. Spanish art, I showed you a little bit of it, but there's a lot more in the Spanish art section. Works by El Greco, for example. I started telling you a little bit about Velazquez, but there is a lot more. We have a whole thing on Rembrandt, and I talk about pretty much almost every painting by Rembrandt that exists in the Hermitage, and other Dutch artists that worked at the same time as Rembrandt, which we call small Dutch artists. and there's a whole amazing room dedicated to them. Flemish art, I shared a little bit about Van Dyck and Snyder's, but there's a lot more. And then we talk about Rubens as well. I have a whole thing on the Impressionists, Post-Impressionists, Matisse and Picasso. There are the collections that I still didn't talk about today. We have a collection of French, German, and British art from 16th to the 18th century, that aren't Impressionists. There are some amazing works there. We saw a little bit on the antiques today. I have lectures on the Gold Room, a lot of other stuff, Diamond Room, and Fabergé, Carl Fabergé at the Hermitage. There is a whole Pazerik burial mound lesson, and private rooms of the royal family. We talk about that too. So if you are interested, first of all, I want to share this link in the chat. And right now I'm doing a pre-sale. So this is available, this price of $100, this is available until May 1st. After that, the price will be $150. That's what I plan to sell it for, but I'm trying to keep the price lower. So you can use that link to buy it. And I also created a little demo version. So if you're trying to kind of like experience what this is like, one of the modules is available already. And I'm sharing this with you for free. You can totally check it out. And just to show you what it looks like. So I created a demo version of module 8, which is the Skylight course and the Art of Italian Baroque. And you can watch the lectures easily here. There are lectures. And then for every module, you get a PDF file where it's kind of like in the format of a guidebook, so that you will remember all of the stuff. It tells you where these things are located at the Hermitage. It gives you a little bit of information about all the pieces that I mentioned in the lecture. And it has some space for notes. You can easily download it. And so if, you will have indefinite access to this, but if you want to revisit it, that it will just give you an easy way to revisit it without having to watch the lectures all over again. And so even if you are not buying this course, this is the module that you can have. Oops, that link is wrong. That one. This is the module that you can have access to completely for free. So please feel free to check it out. So these are the links. And if you are interested, please feel free to click on them before this call is over. And I see a question in the chat. When we all go to St. Petersburg, how do we connect with you for the best tour ever? So if you subscribe to my email newsletter, then if you just reply to my newsletter, it comes to me. So this is the easiest way to get in touch with me. Please feel free to do that. Ooh, I'm so excited you guys signed up. Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn and Marianne. But also, if you just want my email address, I can easily put that in the chat. My email address is very simple. It's my first and last name at Gmail. So Olga Cardamone at gmail.com. So it's in the chat too. And thank you everybody for your wonderful wishes. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Any more questions about anything? About anything that we've seen? About the course, please feel free to ask them in the chat. And at this point, you can unmute yourself too. I'm not lecturing anymore. Thank you. I just want to say I'm so happy to see all of you. I haven't seen you in so long, some of you, and it's just really nice. I love seeing familiar faces, and I just appreciate you staying in touch with me. It means a lot to me that you still read my newsletters, that you come to these events. It really is awesome. So thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So I'm going to say goodbye to you. I still did not go into labor during this. So that's great. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I will share the recording with you on Monday in my regular newsletter. And yeah, bye, everybody.